Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq, with daily insight on the Nasdaq-100 Index, or the NDX, which is made up of 100 of the largest domestic and international non-financial innovative companies listed on the Nasdaq stock market. The NDX has been the barometer for U.S. large cap growth and also one of the best performing indexes over the last decade and a half, not to mention one of the most liquid index ecosystems in the world. Joining me this Wednesday afternoon is Ryan McCormack, QQQ Equity ETF Strategist at Invesco, to discuss weekly trends in the Nasdaq-100. Ryan, welcome back to Trade Talks, and this time next week will be post-election. So it's quite interesting to see the action over the course of, the week of October 28th. It's been seeing some downward pressure this week.
Yeah, we have. You know, you have the QQQ down 0.68% relative to the S&P 500 down around 1.5%, and S&P 500 value down near 2%. And I think if you look at the drivers in the market, it's this resurgence in terms of COVID cases and worries about kind of a second wave, so to speak, as we've really seen the Midwest get hit particularly hard. The VIX index has climbed to levels that we haven't seen since June. And I wonder, if you look at some of the price action, if we can draw some parallels to what we saw from the February highs into the March lows, where, QQQ and the Nasdaq-100 held up a lot better than the S&P 500 and broader S&P 500 value. But year to date, QQQ maintains that 27 percentage points of outperformance, up about 33.6% on the year. So, I think generally when you saw them hold up better in the spring and then the subsequent run, I wonder if we're seeing some sort of a continuation of history. In terms of the rest of the week, exciting in terms of earnings, right? We have some of these Qs heavyweights reporting over the next 2 days. And on Friday, we have the first release of Q3 GDP. We're expecting to see a historic growth coming off the backs of Q2, where we saw a historic contraction since at least the 1940s, which is when some of this data was starting to be compiled. So no shortage of action with these two events, and of course that little election that's going on next week.
When it comes to GDP, I hope the journalists that are out there are looking at quarter over quarter on a year-on-year basis, because certainly Q3 of 19 was definitely different than what we're seeing this year, as is everything that happens in 2020. But let's take a look at our second chart here, where we're looking at sector performance.
Yeah, so I think the downward pressure of sectors like industrials, of financials, of materials, real estate, and energy, right? The fact that Qs either doesn't have exposure to those sectors or is underweight certainly helped performance relative to the S&P 500, as a lot of these sectors were hit particularly hard. I think beyond that, you look at consumer discretionary services. Two reasonable bright spots for the week for QQQ, both in positive territory, with communication services up 1.4%, led by the likes of Facebook and Alphabet, along with Baidu, with consumer discretionary up around 1.2%, being led by the likes of Amazon, Tesla, and Starbucks in positive performance.
All right, and to wrap up here, our last chart, Microsoft earnings came out last night.
Yeah, they did. So, Microsoft continues to show pretty robust earnings and revenue, and this chart is showing their comparable EPS over the past 3 years. They reported Q1 EPS of around $1.82. That was about a 17.7% surprise to the average analyst estimate. Revenue was also a beat, $37.154 billion in the quarter. That was almost a 4% surprise to analyst expectations. Particularly cloud computing has been a positive for the stock. Their Azure platform has seen 48% revenue growth, but that growth rate has been watched awfully closely. Beyond that, you saw their Microsoft Teams function grow to 115 million active daily users. That's up from 75 million back in April. And there's a lot of excitement and optimism around their new Xbox launch next month. But as you look at the stock today, it's suffering down around 4%. I think there were some questions around Q2 guidance around their intelligent cloud, which includes their Azure platform, as well as their more personal computing platform. I think those guidance targets miss the analyst expectation, but Microsoft does have a history of sort of under-promising and over-deliver, so we'll have to wait and see next quarter if that's going to be the case again.
All right, Ryan, thanks for joining us on Trade Talks.
Thanks, Jill.
And thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.